All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Wingrove. I am the Director of Marketing for Social123. I want to thank Megan Eisenberg for joining us today as our special guest. I want to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. So our hashtag for the webinar today is Humanize Your Brand. So feel free to take your thoughts to Twitter. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the question box, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And of course, we will follow up the webinar with an email to everyone with the recording in case you have to jump off. So I'm going to start by introducing my CEO, Aaron Biddar, and Devon, the CEO of Insightpool, both of which have worked with Megan in the past. So I'm going to pass the baton to Aaron to let him divulge.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Emily. And before we get started, a big thank you to Hillary and to Emily and to Megan, who put a lot of time and energy into putting this webinar together. A lot that goes, as everybody on here knows, in behind the scenes to make something like this a reality. So big thank you to you. I can assure you that the topic that we're covering today, along with our rockstar guests, will be a worthwhile investment of your time. We're thankful for everybody that's shown up today, and guarantee you'll enjoy the topic. Before we get started, I do want to say a little bit about Social123. Social123 manages the contact data, or the human data, on behalf of many of the most sophisticated and successful marketers around the world. Today's topic is very near and dear to our hearts. As we spent the past 5 years putting together a data set and a technology that we think will enable this human-to-human conversation. I call it the rehumanization of our trade, or of marketing. As we've gotten more and more sophisticated, I feel like we've lost touch with reality, and I think that this emerging trend and topic is both timely and a topic and trend that deserves a lot of our attention today. I'm honored today to be joined by my peers and some of my friends, Devon and Megan. I've had a chance to work with both of them over the years and have really enjoyed my interactions. And I can say that you're surrounded today by two very intelligent, two very in tune, and two very special people. So with that, I'll turn it over to Devon and just let you guys know that I'm thankful for this opportunity and thankful to be here with you guys.
Hey, thanks everyone. And Aaron, appreciate the time too. I won't take a bunch, but I think there's a really interesting way when you look at data and then how you're able to use that data effectively, because so much data exists. But when you activate it incorrectly, it actually, particularly across things like social media, becomes net negative instead of on email. It's like net neutral. You can have the best data and send it to somebody and send an email, and again, they don't really care if it was a poorly worded or poorly approached note, because it's not that invasive. In social, it can be, but so it's a double-edged sword. So I think today what we're going to go through and get a lot of perspective from Megan is, how you balance that and how do you make sure that there's that human element. So I appreciate the time, and we can keep going. So maybe Megan, if you wouldn't mind giving a quick introduction on yourself, that would be helpful for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be on the webinar with Aaron and Devon and Insightpool and Social123. I have worked with both companies at multiple companies, so I'm a repeat customer, and we certainly see some good results around social data and our engagements with our customers and prospects through these tools. So excited to be here to talk a little bit about humanizing your brand with data. I'm a huge advocate of marketing technology and using the information you have to create a better experience for your prospects and your customers, to get them in your funnel and through, and to keep them as advocates. So thank you for letting me join. I'm here as the CMO of MongoDB. I joined about 10 months ago. What a great company, very tech company, really looking at how you build new apps on a modern database. So thank you for having me.
Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I think I'll take it first, and we'll go from there. But appreciate you being here, Megan. Cool. So I think one of the key areas, is that when you think of data and then you think of trying to activate that data, you start by trying to figure out, there's a lot of words thrown around, whether it be influencer or advocate or, customer advocate, employee advocate. There's all these different nuances of it. And I think it's just simply because of the fact that today, the world that we live in, even if you're a B2B buyer, you essentially hate to be sold to. You love to buy, but hate to be sold. So much of what has happened in B2C space of how we normally consume products is now going to B2B, where we only care if somebody else has said something great about it. So if you think about, the brand engagement of people, relevant influencers are ones that really have kind of pockets and propensities to do the activity that you may want. But again, they don't have to be these large voices with big microphones that you might do. So when you think about data, think about how it really appeals to the individuals that you might be connecting to, not who's the biggest and baddest of them all. Because in many cases, those influencers are doing things for so many multiple different brands that sometimes their actual influence can be diminished a bit. So we'll just go to the next slide. So when you think about after you've identified them, so think about data points that you can have, whether that be are they current customers, whether that be what are the topics they're going through on social and speaking on, who are they connected to. So think of somebody's graph is the strength of their connections inside of the target market that you're looking for. Those are all the different data points. So now when you actually decide to engage them, you really have to approach this as a completely humanized connection, because I think what happens is people have forgotten that data is only as good as how you decide to activate it. So often, and this has happened a lot with companies making this shift, they treat social like they might email and just sandblast stuff out. And actually, that's completely negative. It turns against you, and it shows the person on the other end that you really don't care and shows those colors. So this is just an example of a company that we work with that really tries to humanize it. And they can still do this at scale, but you can see that they're referencing the person name, their name. You can see that they're talking about a topic and saying, hey, we classic cars have a special place in our heart too. And you can see them making a call to action that in the first step is not asking the person to do anything specific yet, not asking them to click here to sign up for this or buy this, or it's getting them involved. And what people have to recognize is that one-to-one connection is actually become a spectator sport. So the people that are engaging with that person will be seeing this activity, and you can watch how it spreads from there. So, Megan, obviously at your different roles, the companies have been, incredibly branded. These are entities that are really well known. And I remember some of the stuff that we even did at DocuSign as well, like trying to get realtors and others, involved, and even a webinar like this. So I was just curious, when you think of tactically what data you use and then how you guys decide to activate, as opposed to maybe, the things like sandblasting emails and others that exist, how do you try and do it in a way that really makes sure that they see that the brand has a personality behind it?
Sure. Well, as far as influencers, certainly having a social proof or someone that influences others to take action or that people respect, and then having a conversation and in a very public forum, I think builds your brand. At DocuSign, we worked with Madison Hildebrand, who did $1 Million. He was on TV and really associated a lot to realtors and loved DocuSign. So we certainly saw a lift by associating ourselves to another brand. At MongoDB, we have tech folks that are well respected, like Mark Callahan is at Facebook and does a lot of blogging and talking in the world and in the audience that we love to engage with. And so we do our best to engage with him, to make sure we're sending him new content, new releases, that we're responding to any of his inquiries. And he is very active and engaged and has a lot of followers in our target audience. So we certainly believe in this and working with our influencers and having conversations with them.
Cool. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. So when you think about characteristic data, this is really interesting because, people have talked about, marketing to demographics for a long time, but all of a sudden the world has changed a little bit where, the demographics may be literally different even per platform, right? So there's people that might be on Twitter that don't fall into your normal demographics but are interacting with you in similar capacity that maybe a millennial would. So, one of the key elements that we see, on the rise is this rise of characteristic marketing, and not quite the death, but close, the death of just demographic marketing. And so, Megan, when you guys look at the customers, even across the funnel, right? So, whether it be marketing automation and all these different things, are you finding that, again, whether it be to, developers or whether it be even to the DocuSign folks as well in the consumer application that you had, how is characteristic marketing affecting what you're doing, or is it? And do you think it's moving faster or slower than what we thought?
Yeah, so we look at all sorts of things, not just like you're saying, demographic, what you give us on your form, but your activity and your actions. We're collecting that. Something as simple as you're on our careers page, we're probably not going to communicate to you. You're looking for a job, so we'll put you in a different sort of communication path. If you're on our docs and you're learning about the product or the database, or you're looking at certain drivers you're going to use or certain languages you're going to code in like Java, certain actions tell us whether you're working on an enterprise project or you're working on a kind of a skunkworks new app build, and we will send you different content and communicate to you differently based on that. So certainly where you go on our web properties, what you do, what you download, and how you interact or choose to interact with us.
Yeah, so I think that, it's almost like the journey development, right? Like, where they're at on their journey, who are they is important, but what they're doing. And even characteristics could simply be like, a characteristic could be, hey, what type of company are they at? Like, so there's a blend between all these, demographics data and characteristic data, particularly obviously as it comes to B2B. So we think that we're obviously on a really big rise there, and we're just in the beginning. So we'll just go to the next slide. So one of the really interesting parts is if you think about where all this data comes from and how we're interacting with it. And I know for like myself, the journey is completely blown up, right? There's just almost no linear path anymore. And so some of the activities that I might do maybe on Facebook, but I might be personally connecting with a buyer or with a brand, and then maybe I'm connecting with the person on LinkedIn, and then I'm emailing them, and then it's really like almost incredibly difficult because all of this stuff is so siloed. And each has a different perspective on what they'll give you. So, we're a partner of Facebook's, one of their first 20 to get access to essentially all of their insights. And one thing about Facebook is that, hey, you can get all this data from us, text analysis, where the top links are coming from, blah, 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 but we're not going to tell you who it is. We're not going to tell you their actual name. We'll just tell you some basic demographics and so forth there too. So, Megan, I was curious, with the release of this new Facebook information, do you think that if you can get this characteristic element data but not know exactly who the person is, do you think that's just more data that's going to complicate things because we can't reach out to that exact person? Or do you think it lays a foundation for what you may do across channels when you can identify them?
Yeah, I think it lays a foundation as you're communicating with them, whether they want to remain anonymous. And actually, people may opt in to communicate with you more if they get to remain anonymous, but you educate them along the way based on their characteristics and what they want. So I'm certainly a fan of collecting more data. I heard an interesting thing about, when the ark was built, there wasn't a flood yet. but you still had to build your arc to get ready for it. I think companies should be building their data repositories and collecting information, so as they learn and figure out how to use it and better communicate and build the right content, it's ready and they have access to it.
Yeah, I think I'll start stealing that analogy, but yeah, that makes sense. So, I think the next slide we'll go on to really talks about, well, this is where the blend of science and art comes together, right? So when you think about how we're using this information, what I'm starting to see happen is people start relying on data to really help develop how they should be contextually relevant, sincere, authentic, et cetera, but really giving their brand almost like a true north, if you will. Just like, maybe, you think of Coke being, pretty lively and fun, et cetera. And maybe you think of, Fox News being almost salacious, if you will, right? But there's so much that you can now tap to tell you, like, how should you establish your brand voice, or how should you do that? So Megan, when you think about that, there's so many personalities that touch a brand, right? You might have an agency, you might have internal people, you might be switching your Twitter handle from one person to the next. What are the processes that you try and do to make sure to stay, A, consistent, and B, cross-check that against what the market is doing so that you either have the right brand voice or not? And then obviously when you decide to publish it, are some of these key tenets being authentic, et cetera? How do you kind of look at that when you're establishing that voice?
Sure. So, we've done a lot of work in the last really 9 months around making sure we understand and capture our brand and are reinforcing it across all channels the right way. So we've done a lot of work around building out brand guidelines, around educating our company. And as we built those guidelines, we built it across the org, not just marketing, but engineering, product, sales, so everyone understands the brand. And then as we execute and communicate through our channels, we use those guidelines, and it also establishes out through all our design work, has a very specific brand and element to it. And then certainly we're monitoring feedback and continually making sure we stick to it and communicate it out. But yeah, you definitely have to make it a priority, and you don't just, as you see things that are out of brand, you communicate, you stop, and you educate so you can move forward with a consistent brand.
I think that's the big thing is, right? Remembering that data should just make you a better human instead of make you a better robot. Because it just no human, if we were all robots, and I think this is really interesting, is like Google's new self-driving cars. One of the big issues they're having is the connection between the driver wanting to take control because they're freaked out. And that's actually what causes an accident. So it's in so many tests that basically the self-driving cars drive perfectly, better than humans. But what the freakish thing is when all of a sudden the human tries to get involved, and then the car has no idea what it's doing because it has no idea how to figure out what a human's trying to figure out. So I think it's a really key element, and obviously, this human-to-human approach is something that Brian Kramer talks about. So, for example, just know that the most amount of data that you use when you activate it be human. And so you can just see, this is just even a B2B company that's just trying to get people involved, trying to, get their information from just a casual outreach perspective. And then you see very quickly what happens is that if you're a B2B company and you're engaging in these conversations and chats, et cetera, other people seeing that, you can then create cookies that may come off of tweets and others that showcase the traffic that's coming in, let's say from social, is actually converting to SQL or MQLs at a 30% greater rate of velocity and maybe a 20% larger price point in ACV than before. Because the reason being that we've seen this so much is the simple fact that people look at it and they almost think it's like a referral. Like when you're talking to somebody, it's almost like it's being created and a referral is actually happening. And so those are the things that we've seen that. And again, big thing is that you need to obviously, track that approach too. So, I think one of the key areas is that, Social123 has done a really good job of is, working with appending a lot of data. So, think of them as a foundational set for making sure that you have the right information. And almost every single time, if you ask somebody about the data in their CRM or their data in any place, there's always more data out there. And how can you actually create it in a way that puts the two of them together and allows you to activate? So I want to turn it over to Aaron now and have him just kind of walk through how to build that deeper connection using data, and then get some feedback from Megan therein.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, Devon. This relationship between the, we'll call it the contact information or the human information, and the context of conversations and the content within those conversations, it all starts to tie together. And as we continue to deploy more and more sophisticated marketing technologies, as we continue to add, individuals that are focusing on the different aspects of how we're going to help customers through their journeys or prospects through their journeys, I think you're gonna continue to see this symbiotic relationship grow, and I believe you'll start to see some of the lines starting to blur. One of the things that we talk about just day in and day out here at Social123, particularly with both our sales and our marketing teams, is about making sure that we are speaking to the right person with the right message at the right time. And so trying to get those three things to line up will allow us to move them into an MQL or an SQL, or move them throughout their journey. And it's important for us to understand, when we're talking about people and human beings, how do you communicate with them most effectively? And one of the analogies that I use with our sales team and our marketing team is, imagine if you just bump into a person, either you're sitting down at a doctor's office or you ran into someone in a neutral environment, and you want to strike up a conversation with them. There's really not much that you can talk about, right? If I just bump into somebody, we can talk about maybe the weather. But there's not too much that we can really engage on. If I know more about you and I know, what are your hobbies, what are your interests, what are the things that people have said that you're good at, or things that you've said you're good at, or where you work, or skills or attributes that you have, it allows me to have a much better conversation. So if I run into somebody and they're wearing a team jersey, I'll say Alabama, since we're in the SEC here in Atlanta, and they're our champions, and they're at a marketing conference or at an inside sales conference, we're able to have a really, I would say, thorough and beneficial conversation where we're both going to be able to engage and have a human-to-human conversation. So my point is, the more that we know about people and what drives them, not just what they're saying, but also who they are, who they've said they are, who others have said they are, it allows us to really take these sophisticated marketing tools that we have and humanize the message to them, which we believe is going to result, and we've proven to result in higher open rates, higher conversions, better conversations, which all lead us to the promised land, which is that those conversions into deals. So when we're thinking about humanizing things, we're thinking about getting to know people and building trust between ourselves and our prospects or our customers as we get to know one another. So Megan, I think when we look at your connection with your audience has to go far beyond earning their business. How do you guys build and gain the trust of your audience at Mongo? And how important is it, or is it important to have more information than first name, last name, company, your traditional business card data?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, we have to build an amazing product. We have very tech audience, and the thing they respect the most is a great product. And so thankfully, the product team and engineering have done a great job. And part of that also is listening and getting feedback and incorporating back into that. From a marketing standpoint, we constantly need to provide value and education. They do not want to be marketed to. They want it straight, real, the facts. What can you give me to make my job easier? Whether it's an architectural guide, what is NoSQL, explaining whether they're an enterprise and they're evaluating the different options, and we provide them with the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So no matter what, at the beginning, it is educating them and providing them with something of value and content. So they want to engage with us. And that certainly goes deeper than, first name, last name. Yep. As we get to learn more about them, and we can educate them further when they have questions like, is your product production ready? Can it handle mission critical apps? Being able to provide them with case studies of their peers that are doing similar things and the success they're seeing and how they're using the product certainly helps with a better, deeper connection. So we're validating and authenticating what others are doing with our product to build on that value. You have
a tough crowd. I mean, you're dealing with very analytical, not nearly as emotional of a group as us marketers. That's a tough nut to crack, I can imagine, and probably a pretty extended journey as well.
It can be, it can be. I would say though, they are quite social. More so than you would think, and they definitely have passion and a positive sentiment and a negative sentiment. So we are definitely engaging with them.
Excellent. All right. So staying engaged over time. One of the things that we have found, and I think that we continue to scream from the top of our lungs, is that one message is not enough. And a lot of us have been in marketing for a while. I can remember back to a senior marketing class where we were learning about Pepsi and how it's 7 touches before you can remember anything or before a message sticks. And I don't know if that still holds water today or not. But I do think it's important that when you're dealing with a B2B buying group, you have to send a very personalized message, and you have to do it with repetition. One of the things that we see as we're being sold to or marketed to is that people are quitting after 1 or 2 attempts. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's just the data and content information and interaction information is so plentiful that a lot of times we neglect taking them through the entire journey and making the right touches. I think it's important for us to look at an individual and have the right conversation with them at the right time and in the right place. Having a segmentation strategy and understanding that not all audiences are created equal and that some segments may be interested at certain times, and really drilling down into what individuals want is core to what we do here at Social123. And we also think it's core to understanding individuals and what makes them up, what drives them, what they're interested in, and then determining when to communicate with them. It's important for us to be consistent in our outreach, but almost more important, staying consistent with our established tone, our voice, and our messaging. So Megan, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned just a second ago that you have people that are very passionate. Do you communicate with them on different channels? I think we know the answer there. And do you have any advice that you can give to the people on the webinar today on how you've been successful communicating? Maybe you do a little bit about DocuSign and Mongo, and if there are any differences.
Sure. So yes, we definitely stay engaged over time. And one, we have a set of nurture programs based on if you're what we would call a suspect, just kind of figuring us out, or whether you've built on top of MongoDB already, but you're not yet a paying customer. And then we talk to you by your title, because title is so dependent on your role with our technology. And then whether you are in a trial of our product, so you're further through the funnel, or whether you become a customer, and we talk to you differently. As far as different channels, we have content that works better on different channels. And we're also looking at where you are in our funnel, whether you're kind of early stage, you're in a trial, or you're an opportunity, a late stage opportunity. And we change the content based on that. And it was very similar at DocuSign as well, where we did a lot more around industry at DocuSign and use case based on your role and department.
Okay. And that's a perfect segue to this next one. How much of that is automated? When you look at that journey and looking for those triggers, can you give us a sense for how much is automated and how much requires human intervention right now?
Yeah, so from our nurture programs, I think we're approaching 30 now at MongoDB. It's very automated from the standpoint that the emails have been created based on title and where you are. It checks constantly your activity, and then it's smart enough to shift you into the right set of communications. From the social side, that's not as automated. That is, we have content available and ready. We have support staff. We have sales and marketing monitoring conversations and engaging, and customer success. So that's a little bit different. And then we also have chat enabled. If you come on our website, we have live folks that are talking with you and answering questions and communicating to you.
Okay. And do you guys, when you think about those different outlets and you think about the different people and or technologies that are managing those outlets, how do you get your team and your technology to have that same voice?
Yeah, so we have content calendars. We have a lot, we're meeting on a regular basis. We're agreeing on the content, how we communicate, the voice. And there's just a lot of training and continual enablement around it.
Yeah. When you bring on a new person to take on one of these different channels or to be part of the different channels, is there a formal training that's in place for those different channels?
Yes, definitely. We train them on the technology. We train them on voice content. There's an approval flow.
Yep. Did we lose Megan?
No, I'm here.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure. It got really quiet here. Okay, perfect. Well, one of the things that we've noticed and we've seen with our customers, as we've looked at, and this is an example of one of our use cases, Observe Point. We started looking at how can we take the different channels and start to blend them together, and how do we use different communications to tie back to data to create a larger audience. This is kind of an interesting example. We went and we started with an audience size using titles, and that was very basic contact data. And we pushed it out and said, well, let's try to find people that are relevant for Observe Point based off of some of the self-reported groups that they're in, and we actually got to increase it by about 93%. So we grew their target market by about 93% by adding in some of the other social components or contact components. And then we took it a step further and we said, well, let's look at when we're building our target market, let's throw skills on top. And they looked at who has bought from them in the past, and we isolated and identified different characteristics that would allow us to, again, grow it by about 75% more. And so when you're looking at, and I think this is, when you're looking at different channels and where different people are having conversations, you can identify and uncover different attributes about people that you may not be aware of that would help drive them into the right buckets for you. And so Megan, my question for you guys is, you have a pretty good sense for who your target market is. You may have, you understand, let's call it the business side of things. Maybe there are certain SIC codes or NAICS codes that define the type of companies that you approach. And within those organizations, you know that there are certain types of people that you're supposed to be talking to that are going to be the decision makers. Have you explored any kind of exercises where you're kind of getting outside of the box, similar to what you see here with Observe Point? Is it something that you guys talk about? Can you give us a little insight into how you think about sort of out of the box identification?
Interesting. We are certainly collecting lots of different types of data, and every time we do that, we're looking at different insights, how people are reacting. We use technologies like demand base to personalize our web content and some of our ad content. And we do it on LinkedIn as well with their products. So yes, we are dabbling in this for sure.
Yeah, it's not many people have put their full foot in or jumped in. I look at it and I see it as something that can create a lot of opportunity, but it also is going to require us to think a lot differently about how we target. And particularly as you start to get into larger organizations that have very well-defined buckets, it becomes harder and harder to accomplish. But I believe as we continue to see the evolution of the accessibility of the contact or the human information tied together with the context of the conversation, that there'll be a lot of stones that have not been uncovered that we should be able to uncover as we continue down this journey. So I'm going to now thank Megan for the conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate the insights. I'll turn it back over to Devon.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think one of the areas that we've been talking about too is, how do you drive conversions? And what every marketer hates to ever hear, and honestly, like every CEO is like, don't tell me about the top of the funnel. Tell me about the bottom. Like, I don't care how many, clicks I got. I don't care how many X I got. And I think that is fair. But I think what's happened is that many times, because we've become so data intensive, we aren't looking at separating what types of clicks we're getting, right? So we're saying, hey, this is the amount of clicks we got, and then this is how many deals we closed. But we're not many times segregating. It's like, well, where was that traffic coming from, and did it go through the funnel any faster? And so when we think about, talking, and we think about engaging, and we think about conversations, and then we think about conversions, it's really, really helpful to understand, if you're going to, sell this to your bosses, that you illustrate the journey of the referral. And I think the biggest thing you can possibly think of is when you're being human across these different elements, you're really trying to engage people because you think that they'll actually be a referral path for you. So this is just, some examples of how you try and create organic or even ad copy across, platforms like even just Twitter, which is one of the easier ones. And it just gives you an idea of what it is you might be saying. How do you try and humanize the element of this? And then, of course, then setting up all the tracking necessary, whether that be through your Pardot forms, or whether that be through your any of your cookie clicks with Bitly, or any of those things, to be able to showcase to senior management, here's why we need to be investing in these activities. Because frankly, let's even take one step back. Nobody picks up their phone anymore if you try and cold call them. Literally, most people just have their cell phone. So the reality is that the businesses had to change to adopt to more content and more buyer journey and figuring out where they're at in the process and so forth. Because you can't just hunt somebody down and get them like a mark that you might have used to do in the Wolf of Wall Street days. People are just so unreachable until they're ready. So again, humanizing is everything. We can go to the next slide. And if we think about the future of social data, I think one of the biggest things is where we're going to really see not just social become segregated, many times, and probably less so in Social123's case because it is specific to data, but almost saying the word social puts you into a bucket of oh, okay, that's this thing that, my intern does. The reality is that, the market's going to really shift from social media to social data and social business. And honestly, we hear this all the time. It's not going to be digital marketing. It's going to be marketing in a digital world. And if you think about, the next slide, we'll talk about the decade that's coming up. of the CMO. So if you think about 10 times the amount of dollars, and this is by a well-known VC that's in this space, Foundation Capital, 10 times the amount of dollars will funnel into this particular space inside of 10 years. And candidly, this is just marketing technology. This has nothing to do with advertising technology that actually comes as a place because of marketing technology. Megan just even mentioned like companies like Demandbase that say, hey, we're figuring out even how to advertise based upon CRM data and then unlocking the two and connecting it and so forth. So that market, when you think about total advertising across the entire universe, is well over $1 trillion. So this is probably the greatest and scariest time to even be a CMO. You know what we found is that there's few unicorns like Megan that exist. There might be ones that are maybe have not been baptized in digital. They might be at a tenure in their career that's digital wasn't what they were baptized in, so they're trying to figure it out. But then they're also too young to just be retiring anytime soon. So reaching out to a lot of folks that are kind of the unicorns in the space, like the Megans and others, is going to be really critical because this is not going away. It's going to be a decade that we see that's the biggest rise ever. We've seen the decade of the CIO. We've seen the decade of the CFO. This is the decade of the CMO, and it's just beginning. So we're super excited to have obviously had all of you on today, and I think that we want to leave about 15 minutes for some questions. And Hillary, are you and Emily going to moderate that for us?
Yep. So we've had some questions come through on social media and some actually in the GoToWebinar panel. So let's kick it off. Megan, we have a question for you. Do you have any simple, easy to implement tricks that are easy to do with data that you don't think marketers are doing today?
Interesting. Let's see. I mean, I think making sure your forms collect the right data so you can, get the information you need to better personalize your content. I mean, I think if you're not doing that, it's a miss. So you should be, certainly focused on your forms, optimizing the content you collect as well as on all channels. Other, I think, simple data things is just monitoring the flow of leads that come in. And if you see spikes or if you see things that are out of order, I typically find insights when I see the data doesn't trend as it usually does. And so just if you're constantly watching your leads and your conversions and velocity and you see something different, try to understand why so you can either replicate it if it's a good thing or minimize it if it's a bad thing.
Cool, that's great. Another question that came in for you in referencing what you said about building the ark before the flood. How do you know how much to invest in the so-called ark before the flood comes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I think you should start by at least having a marketing database like Pardot or Eloqua or Marketo so you can collect the information. I think that if it's available and at any point in time you can use it to customize something, you should. I think that those that aren't doing it are going to perish. The companies that don't collect the data will not be here in the future because those that are collecting it are innovating in their space and they're leapfrogging their competition.
Cool. That's great insight. This one's for Devon. How should companies start focusing more on characteristic data and what kind of programs should be implemented?
So, characteristic data is literally just saying, how do you try and slice and dice what you found that are the nuances that make somebody important to you? So as one example, when Pardot was building their company, they said, look, we really have figured out that there's a characteristic data point of if there's at least one person that has a title of marketing in the marketing department, but no more than 10 people in the marketing department. I think I'm getting those numbers right, but what's really interesting is the nuances of that characteristic. So really doing cohort analysis and doing a segmentation of the customer base that's there, been happy, et cetera, like what are those traits, and then constantly looking for them across the entire life cycle there. And honestly, really innocuous things. So when you think about even touch points, can you measure if the people that you are engaging are just favorited your tweet on social? When they favorited it, is there any correlation between people that are engaging with that has to do with like their bio? Like, do they have a certain amount of character count in their bio? I won't go too in depth on this, but do they say their title? Do they use a hashtag in their bio? There's all these little nuanced ones, and it's weird because if somebody uses a hashtag in their bio, technically they're a little bit more self-promotional, so they're more apt to share and spread your message because theirs goes along with that. So I think one of the key elements there is stopping and saying, hey, who are all the people that are and customers that do great for us? Let's look at every single thing we possibly can, let's say, 50 plus characteristics, and see if there's a common theme, and then go back and constantly look for where that common theme is. And it's probably something that's staring you in the face that we've seen, but it requires just backing up a little bit and having a really open mind when you do the analysis.
Great. Thank you, Devon. And this question is for Aaron. Since you are a data expert, how do you handle dirty data? Any tips for keeping data clean?
Okay. I like the data expert thing. So one of the things that we do that's unique at Social123 is we're able to take our customers' human data, their contact data, and we put it under what we call data assurance. And so essentially what that is we will take that information and then we monitor for the delta in the what someone's reporting about themselves. So by way of example, when Megan left her former job and came over here to Mongo, we had a notification in our system that she had moved from one company to another. And that created a trigger for us to know to pick up the phone and to call to Megan because we had hoped that we will continue to be part of her marketing stack. So one of the services that we offer once we are able to help our customers clean up their data and get it to where it's accurate today, we monitor it from that point forward to make sure that it doesn't go bad. And then we enhance it every time somebody gets a new accolade or talks about a new skill or expertise or joins a new group, we push that into our customers' databases as well.
Great, thank you. We have two more questions for you, Megan. One specific to the commercial real estate industry. When it comes to commercial real estate and lenders, how do you tackle the human-to-human interaction?
Okay, so let's go back to the DocuSign days. I think from the social side, certainly, tying yourself to well-known brands like Madison Hildebrand, an endorsement kind of brand is interesting to get people's attention. But understanding their business, having content and case studies of others in their similar business so they know how to go, implement and use DocuSign to get the best out of the solution. So I think it's just, understand your target audience, what they need, and then educate them, inform them, and get them the solution that makes their life easier.
Great. That's super insightful. Thank you. The last question for you is, you said you are collecting as much data as possible so you're ready when technology evolves. What data do you think you will leverage with the next big change?
Sure. So, I certainly think all the stuff we get today, demographics, activity, what they did on our website, what they're doing socially. I think, if we look at, there's so many devices out there, understanding where they're digesting it. Is it on their mobile, their iPad, their laptop? What apps are they using? If we can collect that kind of information, where do they want to go? Whether it's, banking and whatnot, whether it's WhatsApp, what channels they're using. Are they not on email anymore? I think that's super interesting. Are they, is it video? Do they like animated GIFs so I can communicate to them? I see a rise of animated GIFs these days. People are having a lot of fun with that. So just, information that one tells me what they're interested in, two, where they like to digest their information, and three, how I can better tailor to them specifically.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Megan, for all of your input on the questions and throughout the webinar. We've left a slide here. If you want to learn more about MongoDB, Insightpool, or Social123, please reach out to anybody on the emails and also on Twitter. We'll also be following up the webinar with a recording in case you had to get off early or you wanted to share it with somebody else. So thank you again for everybody that attended, and hopefully you'll join our webinars in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.